So let's start with section 3.2, where we're going to be discussing shifts and supply and demand. So we have talked about what is demand and what is supply. So let's just keep adding to that. As if you didn't already have enough, let's keep adding to it. So the first thing that we need to cover is a Latin term, ceteris paribus. And so what this means, all other things being equal. Now that sounds kind of weird, but let me put it this way. If I were to tell you that you got more income, right, what would you think about that? Well, you would think like, okay, well, I can buy this, I can buy this, I can buy this, I can buy this, right? What if I tell you, okay, what's the next thing you buy, right? Like that's what ceteris paribus is trying to do, is just like everything else stays the same. What happens next, right? So one thing at a time. All other things being equal, what happens next? Because if I were to tell you, hey, the government's putting more money out there, what happens next? And then you would say, well, this happens. And then you would say, well, because of that, this happens. And then because of that, this happens, right? So many factors are happening at the same time. That gets kind of confusing about things. So maybe for instance, if you have one news article coming in, it's telling you one information, and then you have another article telling you something else, and another article telling you something else, right? You're getting all these different information happening at the same time. It's kind of hard to figure out what is happening next. So ceteris paribus says, you received this information. Everything else stops. Because you received this information, what happens next? So it's kind of trying to simplify how the real world is going. Because in the real world, you will be having all of these things happening at the same time. But ceteris paribus says, okay, right here in this moment, because this happened, what would happen next? And it really just makes things a lot simpler when you're trying to, like, for instance, answer a question. So anytime you see the word ceteris paribus, all it's trying to tell you is that all other things equal. And eventually you'll understand exactly what it means, because you're going to be given a situation and then you're going to just think about what happens next. So, for instance, if your income were to increase, generally, what would you be doing? Like if you had $100, how many t-shirts would you buy? Maybe 2, okay? But what if you were to had $1,000? So your income is now $1,000. Would you buy more than 2 t-shirts? And you're probably thinking like, no, I have 2 t-shirts, I'm good. That's fine, that's something else. But what if, but most people, what would you say? Maybe 3 t-shirts, maybe 4 t-shirts, right? Did the price change on the t-shirt? No, right? The only thing I mentioned was ceteris paribus, right? If your income increased, what do? Well, I would buy more stuff because I'm able to buy more of it. And that's exactly what demand is, right? Demand is your willingness to pay something. So if you have more income, I would be willing to pay more for certain things. So sure enough, that is going to change my demand. So here on the left, we have a demand curve. Remember, downward sloping. And we have P0 and Q0. P0 usually means your starting point. So, where does everybody start? We start at ground zero, right? 0. So that's where we start, and Q0 is your first quantity. So that's all that left graph is trying to tell you. When we have more income, we're willing to buy more things, right? And I didn't mention anything about price, ceteris paribus. So now you're willing to buy more. So looking at the right graph, as you can see here, you're at P0 because price didn't change. But now look at what happened to quantity. By shifting the demand curve to the right, you're able to buy more quantity. So now you're at Q1. And that is how we are going to shift the demand curve. Because you're willing to buy more of it, that changed your demand. And again, nothing happened to price. That's very important here. So let's talk a little bit more about other shifts that could be happening. For instance, these are the things that are going to affect your demand. The first one being your income, because we just talked about that, right? It's like, hey, I have more money now. I can buy more things. And this really could be anything. Most of the time, it's going to be the things that you really want out of life. For instance, food. Maybe instead of riding the bus, you can drive a car now because you have more income. Maybe you want a bigger house, so there's going to be that. Or maybe it's going to be certain types of food. So maybe you used to buy ramen noodles, but now you have the money to buy a steak. And everybody's different. But in general, right, if you had more money, what would you be doing with it? Well, probably spend it. A lot of people would say, well, I would save it and invest it, and that's its own thing, right? Because even there, you are going to buy something else. Like if you weren't investing in the stock market, right, you are buying something that you weren't buying before. So your demand does increase there too. So the thing with income in general is that when your demand increases, when your income increases, your demand does change. So income up, your demand's going to go up. So that is a factor of demand, where income does change your ability to pay for something most of the time. We'll talk a little bit about the things that maybe you don't buy anymore, but we'll talk about that in a second. So what's another thing that's going to affect your demand? Well, like if I were to ask you, why do you buy anything? Most of the time people will say, well, it's because I really like it. And that's exactly right. Because if you like something, you're going to buy it. And what if you didn't like something? Well, you didn't buy it. What if something new were to come out? Would you buy that? Some people say yes because it's brand new. So that is a factor that plays into demand. Your taste or your preferences. And that really could be anything, right? Maybe you got older and now you like different things. So for me, I used to never eat something like sauerkraut. So my demand was zero for sure. But now as I got older, right, my demand changes to where maybe I would demand more sauerkraut. So right there, right, nothing changed with sauerkraut. Like it's been the same for thousands of years. But now, because I'm older, all right, this is going to increase my demand. Now, something else could be maybe the doctor says, hey, did you know that if you eat an apple a day, right, it's going to extend your life by 5 minutes? Well, what would people start doing? They would probably start eating more apples. So again, that goes back into the change in taste or preferences. People prefer to live longer. So if by eating an apple is going to make that happen, they are going to demand more apples. If there's going to be maybe there's a new celebrity and they do something very interesting. Maybe they wear certain type of clothing and that starts a new fashion trend. People are going to start demanding to be like that. So the taste or preferences, I like to make it simple in the sense that it's what you like. It is what you like. Okay. So, for instance, a lot of people they want the brand new iPhone. So every time there's a new iPhone comes out, they're going to demand more of the new one. Now, taste and preferences goes both ways. Because if I'm demanding the new iPhone, what happened to my demand for the old one? Well, if I'm buying the new one, I don't need the old one. So it's going to decrease over there. So your taste and preference could go both ways. So for instance, if I love to eat pizza, right, and then all of a sudden I have one bad pizza, I'm like, you know what, I'm done. I'd rather eat burgers. I'm going to increase my demand for burgers because I'm not eating pizza anymore. And because I'm eating more burgers, I'm eating less pizza. And again, that goes back to my taste and preferences. So that goes a long way in determining your willingness to pay something. Is it even if you like it? That's the thing. And so this really happens a lot with samples, is because like if you go to Costco or any grocery store where they're trying to sell you a sample of something, they're trying to get you to basically, hey, if you've never had this before, let me try and show you why you might like it. So they're trying to increase your demand from something from zero to yes, I'll buy it. And so by walking in the grocery store, you have no idea what they're going to have there, right? And it could be anything. And what they're trying to do is trying to basically give you something to where you're like, ooh, yes, I'll buy it. And so with your taste and preferences, that's where they're trying to get you. They're trying to basically add things to what you like. That way you demand it. And by buying it today, you're more than likely going to buy it tomorrow. So because firms understand a little bit about demand, they're able to do things to kind of push you along in that way. And samples are a great way to do that. So if you're on a question, you're trying to wonder, does this have more demand or less demand? Go back to, okay, if it were me, right, or just the general person, do they like this more or like this less? And usually, if it's like if you like it more, well, guess what? You would buy more of it. And if you were to like less of it, then you would demand less of it. Okay. Now, the next thing is changes in the composition of population. That's a complicated way of saying number of buyers. And let's look at this for a second. If we had the hurricane situation with the gasoline, what happened to the number of buyers of gas? It increased, right? We had more people that are just buying gas just to buy gas. And because we have more buyers, well, what happened to the demand for gas? It increased. So because the cause, right, like where did it start? We had more buyers. And because we have more buyers, we have more demand. So if we had less people, what would happen to the demand for things? It would decrease. So usually when we have a big change in population, that means we're going to have more demand for things. That's why a lot of cities really want to attract more people to their city. They really want their city to grow. And by creating things that are really attractive, right, going back to the taste and preferences, by really playing into what might be popular or what really people are demanding, right? They're trying to figure out what are those things. By attracting more people, then more people are going to be buying things. So they understand, again, that changes to the number of buyers, let's make this simple, number of buyers. By increasing this, obviously you're going to have more people buying things. So number of buyers goes up, your demand goes up. And by having less people, obviously you're going to have less people demanding things. So changes in the composition of population, that really could be more people moving in. It could be like the baby boomer situation, right, where we had more babies, which led to more people just in general in the population. Again, more people are buying things. So the main thing to ask you is, are there potential more buyers? And if the answer is yes, then there's more demand. The next thing is the price of substitutes or complement changes. So I like to make this one as simple as possible because it really is. Would the price, so let's say in your mind, all right, the Coke and Pepsi are the same. Let's just say that they are. Right? And if the price of Coke were to go up, all right, and you just want soda, right, you want that type of soda, and the price of Coke goes up, do you buy more or less Coke? Well, law of demand would say, price goes up, I buy less. But you still want soda. So what do? You buy the Pepsi. Because the price of the Coke changed, you demanded more Pepsi. And you're probably thinking like, well, that doesn't really happen. Well, with the Coke and Pepsi situation, right, that there are other factors that are changing your demand for something, right? That like you might believe like, well, I really don't like Coke or I really don't like Pepsi, and that's fine. But in general, when you're talking about substitutes, the idea is that you receive the same utility. So let me break it down. When we're talking about the substitutes, the idea is that you can eat. So here's you, nice picture. We can go A or B. And if you were to go A or B, you get 100 utility or 100 utils. If you're wondering, utils, that's a short version of utility. Like that's how much happiness, how many smiley faces you get. So 100 utils, either way, A or B. So it doesn't matter to you if you go A or B. But what does matter to you? The price. That's what matters to you. Because again, I want cheaper things. I want to save as much money as possible. And if Coke is going to charge me more money, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to demand more Pepsi. And that is the price of substitutes. Like if you were looking at, let's say, this type of vegetable or this type of vegetable, it's like, you know what? I don't want that one. Like for some people, it's organic or conventional products. Some people are like, you know what? These are the same to me. So if they're the same to me and they're like, you know what? This is higher priced. I'd rather go the conventional route. That's the price of substitutes there. If you were to look at like the generic brand and the name brand, right? For some people, it's like, you know what? I just want cereal. So if I just want cereal, right, I'm going to get the same utility out of Kellogg's or the HEB brand. So either way, right, you're like, you know what? Which one is cheaper? And that's how price of substitutes work. So anytime the question comes up and it's like, does this change your demand? You have to ask yourself, okay, which one's cheaper? And that's usually what helps me out when I'm trying to figure out the demand for something. So, which one's cheaper? Because in general, right, if the price of Coke, and if you're wondering why am I writing it like this is how we do it in economics, where we write the price for something and then we write the name of it. It's kind of, just reading it left to right. The price of Coke, the price of X. That's how we write things. So the price of Coke, if the price of Coke were to increase, what would happen to the quantity of Coke? Right? Well, it would go down. And if you are really wanting a soda and you're buying less Coke, that has to mean you're buying something else. So you would demand more Pepsi. And this really goes with a lot of things. For instance, if I were to say the price of bananas go down, okay, am I buying more or less bananas? Well, I'd be buying more bananas. And if I'm buying more bananas, what would happen to my demand for apples? Well, for me, it would go down. And if you're wondering, well, I buy bananas and apples, right? And that's true, right? For me, I do buy both. However, right, if I buy more apples, but I don't change my quantity of bananas, well, one of these things are going to go bad because I'm not going to be able to eat everything at one time. So for me, right, because the price of apples go down, I'm probably going to buy more apples because I can buy more. And by buying more of these apples, I have to buy less bananas. Now, the thing is this. Did the price change on the bananas? And if you're wondering, yes, let's go back. Let's start from the beginning. The price of apples goes down. I buy more apples, and because I'm buying more apples, I'd rather buy that and not bananas. Did I say anything about the price of bananas? No. So therefore, the demand, right, my willingness to pay for bananas went down. Nothing happened with price, just my demand for it. So because that happens, right, then we would shift the demand curve to the left. So that's the thing here, is that nothing happened with the price of bananas or things like that. Because I'm buying more of this, that changed my demand over here. Now, if the price of bananas changed, then we can go back over here and figure out what happens next. But that's the thing here, is what changed? My demand for it. Nothing about the product changed, just my willingness to pay for it because I'm buying something else. Now, let's go into complements for a second. So, if you know anything about the word compliment, what it means is you're getting, like, basically someone is saying something really nice about who you are, right? And that's a compliment. But that's not what we're having here in economics. A compliment are things that you go together, right? They're complementary. Basically, because I have this, it'd be really nice if I also had this. So they're complements. They go together. And a lot of examples happen like this, like peanut butter and jelly. Fantastic together. You could buy them separate, but they're way better together. Ham and cheese, same deal. Cereal and milk, right? You could eat dry cereal, and that's perfectly acceptable. And you could also have milk, which is great. But if you were to have them together, that's where the most utility could come from. So that's complementary products. That's it. Those are some great examples there. And if you're thinking about some other ones, I'd love to hear about them. So complementary, things that go together. How does this affect your demand for things? So let's talk about it. Let's talk about cereal and milk for a second. If the price of milk were to go up, are you buying more or less milk? Less milk. And because you're buying less milk, right, how much demand for cereal do you have? Probably less. Because if you have less milk, then why would you have cereal if you're not going to use them together? So by having less milk, you're more than likely to have less cereal. And that happens with a lot of things, because by buying them together, right, and you buy less of one thing, why would you buy the other? So therefore, they're both moving in the same direction. So by buying, so price changes, and it affects both in the same direction. What do you mean by same direction? Well, here we go. I can't spell direction. Hold on, sorry. Direction. There we go. So, if the price of milk were to go up, what happened to my quantity of milk? It would go which way? More expensive. I'm a consumer. Buy less. Yeah. And by buying less milk, I'm more than likely going to buy less cereal. Boom, boom, boom. Same direction. Okay. So that's how complementary products work. Is that by this happening, right, by the price of something happening, I'm buying less of something else. And this really could go for anything that goes together. So movies and popcorn, right? If I go to the movies more often, what is happening to my demand for popcorn? It's probably going to be increasing, right? If I were to look at maybe buying an iPhone, right? What am I more likely going to buy? A phone case. So by the iPhones changing in their prices, for instance, it's too high, I'm going to buy less of it. Well, then I'm not going to need the new iPhone case. So that changes my demand for the cases. Because the price changed over here, my demand for something else completely changed over here. So if the price of movies were to go down, my quantity of movies were to go up, and then because I'm buying more movies, my demand for popcorn will go up. Now, if you're wondering, well, my demand for popcorn wouldn't go up. Well, let me ask you, if you went to the movies more often, what does change about your life, right? Maybe you're going out with friends more, so maybe you're demanding more friends, or maybe you're demanding more gasoline to drive to the movies, right? There is something that is changing here because you're buying more movies, whatever that may be, right? That could be a complementary product. So that is how complementary products work. And the main thing again is, did anything happen with the price of popcorn? Like, movies are cheaper, so I buy more movies, and because popcorn lowered their prices, I'm buying more popcorn. That's not what happened at all. Because the price of the movies changed, then I'm changing my demand for the popcorn. That's the key thing there. So those are and the last one is your changes in expectations about the future. So on this one's an interesting one in the sense that basically, if I were a consumer, I want the one that's going to provide me the cheaper price. Okay. And so if I were having expectations about the future, that's going to change. Where is that cheaper price? So for instance, if they in the news were like, hey, there's going to be a surplus of gas tomorrow, right? What does that mean? Oh, surplus. Okay, that means the price is going down tomorrow. Okay. So if the price is going down tomorrow, do I buy gas today? No. I buy tomorrow because guess what? It's cheaper tomorrow. I buy less. I buy less today. I buy more tomorrow. And the same thing is going to happen where it's like, oh, there is a war happening which is going to change the supply of gas. Oh, if there's a war happening, that means there's going to be less gas. That's going to create a shortage, which means the prices are going to go up. Prices are going to go up tomorrow. Where is the cheaper price? Okay, price is up tomorrow, cheaper price today. Where am I demanding? Today. Now, because the price is changing tomorrow, right? Not today, that changes your demand today. All right, so changes in expectation about the future. So price is up tomorrow. I'd rather buy today. And you're probably thinking, well, didn't earlier you say that the change in prices has nothing to do with the change in demand? And that is true. But the thing is that it's change in the expectations. Because did the price change today? No. When does the price change? Tomorrow. And because the expectation is tomorrow, that affects your willingness to pay today. Absolutely nothing happened to the price today. Everything is in the future. And that is why you change your demand. So let's say this. If the price tomorrow were to go down, what happens to your demand today? Go back. Where is the cheaper price? Always ask yourself, where is the cheaper price? And okay, the prices go down tomorrow. Well, if the price is here today and down tomorrow, the cheaper price is there. So therefore my demand is going to be higher there. Like, I'm going to buy tomorrow. So what would happen to my demand today? Demand today would go down. All right. So see how the expectations about prices are going to change your demand about something. Now, what about the income? Like, if I were to expect to be paid next week, I probably would make some decisions about what I'm going to do today. Like, maybe I would buy an extra bag of cereal at the grocery store because, like, it's okay, I got the money for it. A lot of people take this a step further, where they're going to get a raise next year and they're going to buy a house today. So it could go both ways, right? It could be something as simple as buying an extra bag of cereal, or it could be buying a house with the expectation that you have more money coming in. But it also could go this way. What if you are expecting to lose your job next year? What if economists are saying that there's going to be a recession and everybody's going to lose their job? What would happen today? Like, if you think you're going to lose your job tomorrow, would you buy stuff today? Or would you be like, oh, I need to save as much money as I can because I'm not going to have a job bringing in money? So that also plays into expectations, is your income. If you think your income's going to go down, then you would probably save more money today. And that also plays in. So these are the factors that are going to shift your demand around. In the next video, we'll talk about the things that are going to shift around your supply. Okay, I'll see you there.